Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Build an Employer Brand That Attracts Top Tech Talent. My name is John Sudicum, and I would really like to thank you for joining us today and carving some time out of your busy schedules. So let's just talk a little bit about our plan today before we get started. So we're going to try and make this webinar as interactive as possible. So we have some questions lined up that we will already answer today. And if you have any questions as well, please submit yours via the question panel. Next, today's webinar will be available on demand after the live session, and a link will be sent via email, so please do watch out for that. And last, there will be a post-webinar survey, and we would love your feedback as this helps us continually improve on what we are presenting to you and make sure that these topics are truly helpful for you and your business. Okay, so here's our plan for today. We are going to begin by first giving a brief introduction of the state of tech hiring. We'll then move on to shaping your employer brand strategy, truly understanding your audience, and then executing your strategy. And then last, we're going to close out by discussing metrics and measurement. So now that we've gotten all that out of the way, why don't we just jump right into it? So whether it's cultivated or not, your organization has an employer brand. Your brand may be something that rarely hits the agenda during leadership conversations, or it could be something that's top of mind and frequently discussed. Regardless how you've chosen to approach it, your employer brand can be the deciding factor in whether top talent chooses you over your competitors. So with that being said, building a funnel of candidates for your organization requires a robust employer brand, one which is deliberate, data-driven, and continually tended to. And given the unique challenges that organizations face in trying to attract technologists, many of whom we all know are in high demand, employer branding is an increasingly crucial differentiating factor in a candidate's decision. And if you're here now, you clearly know that employer branding matters, but here are a few specific reasons. First, it allows you to differentiate your organization from competitors. It also attracts informed candidates to your job openings. It helps move candidates down the funnel more efficiently. It signals to your technologists that your company is a great place to work, and it helps reduce attrition with new and future employees. And when we look at the numbers, a strong employer brand reduces turnover by up to 28% and reduces cost per hire by 50%, which are two very significant stats. But when we look at tech specifically, there are a few challenges that are exacerbated. First is that many tech organizations are going through significant technology transformation. Today, nearly every business is considered a tech business in some regard, or at least heading in the direction of becoming a tech-oriented business. And in fact, Microsoft estimates that globally there will be 149 million new tech jobs worldwide by 2025, with roles ranging from cybersecurity to data analysis and software development. And with COVID-19 increasing the need for things like cybersecurity and digitization, these numbers may even be they might even be expedited. To add to this challenge, many technologists are largely content in their roles or reluctant to change, especially given recent events. In 2019, for example, with DICE, we conducted research and found that 45% of technologists said that they would likely change employers. Fast forward to 2020, and that number dropped to 38%. And then during COVID-19, that number sat at 32%. For tech employers, this creates a multifaceted problem, with the first being low tech unemployment. And even so, this number for tech unemployment it remains pretty steady even amidst COVID-19. And then this is followed in that technologists will only consider new opportunity if they have a very good reason to do so. And then this is coupled with the fact that technologists are truly inundated with opportunities, and there's truly a lack of supply to keep up with this demand. And last, you have to compete with attractive tech companies that have global employer brands like Google or Apple. So this begs the question, how do you not only compete, but win the race for tech talent? Well, obviously, we're all here, and the answer is employer branding. So with this in mind, we are going to shift to discussing what shapes your employer brand. So for anyone that doesn't know, your employer brand is the image that your current, future, and past employees have in their minds about working for your organization. As with all brands, the reputation often precedes the experience, meaning that prospective employees perceive and get to know your brand through a variety of means before truly experiencing and being a part of it. So a strong employer brand works hard both inside and outside of the company. And to begin shaping your employer brand, your team should answer a few fundamental questions to understand where your organization is today and where you hope to be in the future. Now, I'm not going to read all of these questions, but these questions cover topics like what makes your organization unique and credible, to why you are the best employer and what your mission is. These are all critical questions because, for example, DICE found that 76% of technologists consider a company's mission important when considering a new employer. So let's take a look at a few employer brands that are excelling right now. And let's start with HubSpot. HubSpot's culture page begins with a document called the Culture Code, which publicly pronounces every vision and value they hope to promote and instill in employees, candidates, and customers. Moving further down the page, you'll find sections discussing opportunities for learning and development. You'll also find things like HubSpot's commitment to diversity and inclusion and interviews with real HubSpot employees. The language also consistently focuses on the job seeker. And it really says, here's how we can help you grow. Salesforce has been getting a lot of attention recently as the leading CRM software. Looking at things like their career page and careers Instagram boast their commitment to making it more than just a job, but instead an opportunity to transform your future. In addition, they discuss programs like their 6-month maternity leave and their commitment to building a diverse workforce. Let's also look at Microsoft. So forced to compete with Apple for the cool space, Microsoft had long seemed like the less desirable alternative. But the recent efforts to transform their image has gone a long way, from their beautifully curated careers Instagram feed to an informative and truly helpful recruiting insights page that even shows you how you can land a job at Microsoft via social media. So given these recent efforts, they are truly changing the conversation. So we've talked about the basics of employer branding, but let's talk about really knowing your audience. So when developing a brand or product, the most effective organizations invest a lot of time and effort into researching their target audiences so they can craft the messages that will resonate and inspire action. As a recruiter, you can emulate this same approach and develop frameworks for understanding the types of technologists you want to reach. So let's start by talking about technologists as a whole. And I just want to say here is that I'm going to show quite a lot of data, and I just want everyone to know that I will be sending out a recording of today's webinar. So if I do move a little quickly through these, rest assured that you will have access to it. So first, many technologists want the opportunity to be more creative in their jobs. So boosted creativity in turn leads to more satisfaction with the job experience. And specifically, 26% of technologists said they were looking to change employers so that they could have more opportunities to be creative in their work. At the same time, those that are less satisfied with their career or their job tend to desire more creative opportunities. Next, corporate reputation truly matters to technologists. For example, 82% of technologist respondents say they would not apply for a role at a company that offered a higher pay but had a bad corporate reputation. Now, this stat specifically, I think, creates the biggest need for employer branding for any organization. Next, technologists want to know that their work is both cutting edge and that it makes a difference for the business. In fact, 14% of tech professionals highlight more meaningful work, and 12% say more interesting problems to solve were ways that companies could increase their happiness at work. And last, 17% of technologists note recognition, and 13% note knowing their opinion matters as ways that their company can increase their happiness at work. Technologists don't really want to be treated as a brain in a jar. Rather, they want to be understood and valued by an employer. So we have a broad overview of what makes a technologist unique, but we should also dig deeper into different segments. And one option is to look at years of experience. This will help you understand their unique characteristics and set you up to address their goals and pain points in your initial communications, as well as throughout the interview process and when an offer is made. So based on years of experience in the tech industry, we've outlined 3 fundamental segments that are worth considering as you develop your organization's own unique segments. You can use these examples to inspire your efforts and determine unique qualities within each group. So as I said, one way of creating these personas is based off of years of experience. So here, for example, we have the entry-level persona. So here they have a goal of setting up their career for a good path down the line. Some key characteristics include their longing for more responsibility and wanting to pay off, for example, their college debt. Meanwhile, some of their pain points include comparing themselves to their peers and not being financially stable. For mid-tier professionals, their goal is to be excited about what they're doing and to continue learning. Some key characteristics include that 79% seek new employers to gain higher compensation, and 30% feel burnt out in their current job. Meanwhile, some pain points include the mounting pressure both at work and at home with perhaps a growing family, and also not being paid what they deserve given the amount of responsibility that they have. So some key considerations they might have based on this include sponsorship of training and certifications, offering benefits beyond compensation, and other ways that employers might show their employee value. And last, what we have here are seasoned professionals. These professionals, which have been working in tech for 11 to 15 years, want to be as efficient in their job as possible so that they can limit the time spent away from their personal lives. Some common characteristics include that 30% say a lack of work-life balance is a top reason for feeling burnt out, and that 36% are seeking new employers to gain better working conditions. The pain points for these professionals include not having a positive work-life balance and feeling overwhelmed with their amount of responsibility. Meanwhile, some key considerations include how your organization can enrich life outside of the office, how you measure employee satisfaction and respond to it, and how employees can voice their opinion. So I certainly understand that I've shown a lot of data here and a lot of copy as well. So I just want to repeat again that we will send out a recording of today's webinar. And as I said, these are examples of how you can create candidate personas, though you can break them down into different topics beyond this, like areas of expertise or perhaps education level. And while these personas will be helpful, let's all face the facts that quite a lot has changed over the past few quarters with COVID-19. And given these changes, DICE collected technologist sentiment to better understand how their opinions are changing given these recent events. So at this point, I'm going to present a lot of this data. And first, what we found is that many technologists are finding that their workload has increased. In fact, 70% of technologists have found that their workloads have doubled since COVID-19. Given today's circumstances, many employers have used it as an opportunity to further develop things like their e-commerce portals and digital offering. So it's not surprising to see that technologists have had increased workloads to get projects of this sort completed. And related to that, what we found is that technologists generally feel that they have job security. And when it comes to how COVID-19 has changed what technologists consider important in a job, quite a bit has shifted perspective. For example, company leadership has increased in the minds of technologists. This makes sense as company leadership has had to act rather quickly and use their best judgment to set their teams up for success. A lot of eyes have been on company leadership, and it's likely that your candidates will want to know more about these individuals during the recruiting process, whether it is in your initial communications or throughout the interviewing process. It's also important to note that companies' COVID-19 response is important to technologists. We often see updates in the news related to layoffs, furloughs, and salary cuts. Technologists clearly take note of these company events, and they place value on how potential employers are navigating these uncertain times. So with this in mind, I think it's certainly important to have answers ready on this topic throughout the interviewing process. And last, technologists overwhelmingly believe that remote work is more important now, as this is the highest ranked response. Moving forward, technologists are perhaps more likely to be more selective of the companies that they will work for based off of their remote work policies. But let's take a few slides to talk a little bit more about remote work because it has become such an important part of work today. So here at DICE, we've been collecting information on remote work preferences for years, and it's been clear to us that this is something that technologists look out for in an employer. And while many employers maintained in-office work policies for years, they were forced nearly overnight to adopt work-from-home policies for the foreseeable future. So given these changes, we at DICE gathered information around the remote work sentiment from technologists with a survey that went out every 2 weeks. So let's dig into some of these findings. First, we collected data on which types of work technologists considered desirable. First of all, overwhelmingly, we can see that technologists prefer part-time flex work as well as 100% remote work compared to 100% in-office work. We also collected data on how much technologists actually enjoy working remotely full-time now that they've had the opportunity to do so. And what we found is that technologists almost overwhelmingly like working from home. And one common thought around remote work is that it can be a detriment to company culture, which certainly makes a lot of sense. If employees are dispersed and the company doesn't make an added effort, this can definitely be the case. What we found, however, is that technologists generally do not see remote work as a detriment to company culture. As we can see on the right there, only 15% of technologist respondents to our survey said that it's a detriment or extreme detriment to company culture. Technologists also recognize a range of professional benefits when it comes to remote work. At the furthest left with the most votes, technologists find it easier to work at home. What's also interesting is that many technologists find that they're more productive while working remotely. While this is sure to vary based on a variety of factors, it's pretty fascinating to learn that productivity levels are rising in some cases. We also wanted to gather information around the personal benefits of remote work. And it's pretty clear that the ability to save time on and have essentially no commute is a benefit for technologists. I personally know of individuals who travel more than an hour to their office, so I definitely understand the appreciation for a shorter commute. It's also interesting to see that schedule control and work-life balance play a role as well. This is something that certainly came across for mid and seasoned professionals, as this is one of their top priorities shown in our persona segments. Last, it's also worth noting that technologists are saying they're also receiving more time with family given these circumstances, although I think they would admit that if they have children, these circumstances are also presenting a new set of challenges as well. And while there's certainly many benefits to remote work and reasons to incorporate this into your employer branding, we also ask technologists what some of the cons are. And I think that these are certainly things that your organization can take into account to improve your remote work offering to your technologists. So here we can see that distractions, working more hours, and difficulty developing working relationships all rose to the top as the biggest personal cons. So at this point, we've covered our segments. We've taken a deep dive into remote work and how this can influence your employer branding given these circumstances caused by COVID-19. But at this point, I want to talk about executing your strategy. Because even the most thorough strategy is made useless if it isn't executed effectively and efficiently across a range of channels. And that's what we're really going to dig into here. So let's just get started. So in sales and marketing, there's a basic framework that's used for thinking about how a potential customer becomes a paying customer. And it's called the buyer's journey. And I'm sure many people here heard about it, but it's composed of 4 stages, which are awareness, consideration, decision, and customer experience. And with the buyer's journey in mind, you can map out the content types, messages, and channels that will help your prospects at every stage in their journey. Similarly, recruiters can use a candidate journey framework to strategically create and deliver content that engages, informs, and aids job candidates at each stage. As with any strategy, the candidate journey is not completely static, meaning candidates might jump back and forth between these different stages. It's also important to audit your current candidate journey, or at least your interpretation of it, before you get started on truly mapping this out. So we're going to cover a few tips in each stage of the candidate journey, starting with awareness of employer brand. The important thing to remember here is that you should meet talent where they already are. This means diving into social media and creating social content that highlights your unique culture and what makes it different, and empowering your employees to do the same. This also means that your company should actively apply for company culture awards. This is really a way that you can get your efforts in front of a very large audience. And between the PR and social sharing, the results can be pretty incredible. And this can certainly be a way that smaller organizations that are trying to compete with the Amazons and Googles and Apples of the world, this can be a way that you can really get your brand out in front of a large audience. And last, when you have the budget for advertising across a range of digital and traditional media, can allow you to creatively tell your employer brand story on a range of platforms. Now, I know it may be difficult to get the advertising dollars for this type of initiative, but building a case for it can really be a differentiator. Next comes consideration of employment. Now, a technologist will look actively or passively for a variety of reasons. Maybe they didn't get the promotion that they were looking for, or perhaps a company's career site and mission is particularly inspiring and they feel inclined to put their application in for a specific job. Whatever the reason may be, it's important to be able to engage these professionals at this moment. So let's hone in on job descriptions, because this is really where the rubber meets the road for candidates. Now, job descriptions are only that if you treat them that way. But if you use it to your full advantage, you can inspire candidates with the work your organization is doing and how they'll contribute, as well as the benefits and perks that you offer as an employer. So first, with job descriptions, specificity and repetition are key. Be specific about the work that they'll participate in, as well as the skills that are required and what the day-to-day works like. Help them imagine themselves in this role and really get them excited about it. And I can't emphasize enough about being specific about skills. For example, if you're going to hire a software developer, should they know JavaScript? Should they know Should they know C++? What is the thing that they should really bring to the table here? Next, show the big picture by discussing their work, how their work will make an important impact on organizations' wider goals, as well as how it will impact clients and maybe even the world. This is really where you can help inspire these technologists and get them excited about what they would do in this potential role. And last, make your offering clear. If you offer remote work or flex work or professional development or something like extended leave or volunteer opportunities, you should definitely make it clear. And because remote work isn't necessarily a one size fits all, you should discuss how your company does remote work better than any other company, whether that is giving a stipend to make it an effective office, or how you help reduce the friction of work-life balance. So now let's talk about candidate experience and decision. When a technologist applies for an open position, it should largely be considered a lead rather than a closed deal. In fact, it's at this point where you truly need to begin selling your employer brand. And you can enhance this experience through a combination of automated emails and personalized communications. If nothing else, this makes sure that candidates know that they're on your radar. And in these emails, as well as other communications, you can make the hiring process clear and ensure that candidates know where they are in the process and when they should hear about next steps next. And really, at all costs, avoid the candidate application black hole. And we're all familiar with it. After submitting an application or finishing an interview, a candidate can feel that they've now entered some type of black hole where they have no further info on what the next steps are. Avoid this by providing clear and concise updates and expectations. And last, with employee experience, it's critical that every company empower its employees to share their experience with the world. With the content, it might not necessarily be polished, but that's kind of the point. This type of content comes directly from employees, which helps create trust. So this means everything from encouraging your employees to create Instagram posts or tweeting about the appreciation that they're receiving or a milestone achievement in their career. So we're going to round out today by very briefly discussing metrics and measurement of your employer brand. So defining, building, and communicating your employer brand is a process that will gain momentum the more you cultivate it and refine it and collect data and then re-refine it. And cultivating and refining your brand will allow you to make stronger connections, really. And this also helps you hone in your messaging and fine-tune the candidate journey and observe how employees are organically telling your employer brand story across their different platforms. And as with any initiative, measurement is a critical aspect of developing your employer brand and its performance. But there are also a lot of different things that you can measure, ranging from candidate quality and cost per hire to brand awareness and acceptance rate. Whichever metrics your organization chooses, it's important to be consistent and regularly track this performance. So before we move on to questions, I would briefly like to go over just a few ways that I think Dice can help with everything that we've just kind of discussed. So in today's highly competitive market, it takes more than a simple job ad to recruit the best. Dice Employer Branding Solutions offer a multi-channel approach that allows you to target top tech talent and your open positions and raise your brand awareness within an engaged and relevant audience. Also, we spent a lot of time talking about remote jobs and remote work and how it's certainly resonating with the technologist audience right now. And with our remote jobs functionality, you can easily post your jobs and get more exposure to searches from candidates that are specifically interested in this type of work. And between our expertly curated sourcing services and our unmatched experience creating career events that are designed to attract best-in-class technologists, Discovering the perfect candidates is now easier than ever. Great, so I hope my sales pitch wasn't too long, and at this point I would like to go into a few questions that you might have. And the first question that I do have here is, how can small companies in America compete for top tech talent when the recruiting landscape for larger companies has now fully embraced remote hiring and has very robust employer brands? So I think that's a great question. And one of the things that I think really will set organizations apart from these tech giants is their employer brand. And certainly, compensation is something that a lot of candidates are looking for, both within and without of the technology segment. But there's so much more that technologists also consider important. We covered things like the opportunity to be creative with the work that they have, having a robust remote work offering. If your company offers things like certifications or trainings, that is something that certainly resonates with the technology audience as well. And then the other thing I would say is to not feel discouraged in competing with these larger organizations. I think that one thing that smaller organizations certainly have as an advantage is that they can be a little bit more agile perhaps than the Googles and Amazons and Apples of the world. So if it comes to creating a more robust remote work offering, the scale is definitely smaller for smaller organizations. So you might be able to act a little bit quicker, as well as have perhaps a more personal approach than some of these larger organizations. So please bear with me as I go through additional questions that we have. I also have a question on whether or not remote work is here to stay. And I would say with almost certainty, yes. And I think that this is something that employers will certainly have to bake into their employer branding moving forward. What we found is that technologists for quite some time have wanted to work remotely, and now that they've been given the opportunity to do so, they're actually continuing to enjoy it. So I think that the remote work offering will certainly resonate with technologists as they look at prospective employers moving forward. And I also think that for an employer, it means that not just offering remote work, but it's how you offer it. Whether you offer funds to create an effective at-home office, and also ways that you keep your employees connected via remote work. I think that all of these are things that need to be explained beyond just saying that a specific job is offered as remote. So I have another question here on, are there any incentives that recruiters and employers can offer employees so that they can post to social media their different milestone career events or any happenings so that they can boost their employer brand? I would say that one thing that certainly comes to mind is asking your employees to post a career achievement or whatever that post might be, and ask them to tag your company's handle. And you could provide certain incentives like a gift card pulled out of a hat of those technologists that do create a post that includes your company handle. I'd say that's certainly one incentive that could be offered. I have a question here on how much budget should be allocated towards brand promotion and employer brand promotion? I'd say that it's certainly not a one size fits all. Um, that's not a one size fits all answer that I can give. What I'd say is that it's certainly taking into account the overall budgets that are allocated to perhaps the recruiting efforts. And then I would also look at what specifically you're trying to get out of your employer branding efforts. So go back to the metrics that we talked about, whether that is reducing cost per hire or overall brand awareness, or perhaps increasing your acceptance rate. I think that would certainly influence the type of budget allocation that you would use for your employer brand promotion. I've also received quite a few questions asking about a recording of the webinar, and I would certainly like to repeat myself and say that we will be sending out a recording of today's webinar that will likely come over the next day or two, so please do watch out for that. So I have a comment here around technologists not seeing remote work as a detriment to company culture. And yeah, I would certainly agree that it is a surprising piece of data that we have. However, I would say that there are certainly a lot of organizations that are doing a great job of having things like virtual happy hours and really ensuring that their teams are remaining unified while being certainly geographically separated. I have another question here about ensuring, how do you ensure that your company gets to know, excuse me, that your prospective employees get to know those that will be on their team if they're not physically in the office? I'd say that's a great question. One thing that I would do is, I think with hiring a remote employee, one of the most important steps is the onboarding process, and onboarding really does have downstream effects ranging from productivity to retention. So I think that one thing that is very important is ensuring that they know who is on their team, but also who's on an adjacent team that they might work with. What I would recommend is to have either a welcoming group or someone that will be essentially a go-to resource for a new employee for those few weeks or months as they begin their work with your organization. They can also go through and essentially provide photos of who they'll be working with, but then also set up meetings with anyone that they could potentially work with or just would benefit from understanding where they fit into the organization as well. So that's a great question. I have another question here. And how often do you recommend measuring success of employer brand using the metrics that I've outlined? I would say that it would be really important to first consider how much hiring your organization is doing. So whether that is, perhaps 10 or less than 10 employees or technologists per year, or some organizations might have dozens. I would first consider what the volume is like, and then I would recommend perhaps on a quarterly basis, depending on that volume, looking at these metrics and perhaps making adjustments either at the quarterly basis or on an annual basis. So at this point, I'm going to thank everyone here for attending. I have a few more specific questions that I can get to via email, so please do look out for that as well if I did not get to your questions today. But I would like to thank everyone here for joining us, and I hope to see you at the next DICE webinar as well. So I hope you have a great rest of the day and rest of the week. Thank you.